It's time for Dying to Bloom with your host, Carrie Potter.
Good morning. Welcome to Dying to Bloom, a monthly show that encourages thought and discussion on our burial practices and how they impact the environment. It's brought to you by the Green Cemetery Fund. Please visit the Rockland Community Foundation at rocklandgives.org to find out how you can donate to the Green Cemetery Fund. What is a green cemetery or green burial, you may ask? Well, to me, green burial equals land conservation. It's a way to fund land conservation. Just take a regular burial practice and minus the embalming process, to me, which is invasive and unnecessary, and by the way, not required by law. Take away the large headstones and instead imagine a natural stone marker. Take away those big cement vaults that are buried in the ground that do cost money, by the way, and are also not required by state. They may be required by the cemetery, however. That is a cemetery regulation, not a state regulation. And take away those lush green grass lawns that may be maintained by chemicals. And minus those expensive, fancy hardwood caskets that may have come from our beautiful rainforests. What's left? A natural body and a biodegradable shroud, a natural coffin interred in the ground in an open meadow or forest, surrounded by wildlife in their natural habitat with an indigenous stone marker or a native plant marker. And that's what green burial is all about. And again, the money spent to bury the body is a way to fund land conservation. It remains a natural, open habitat for the animals, available for hiking and natural enjoyment. And these do exist, by the way. We have a beautiful one in upstate New York called Green Springs in Newfield, and we have another one in New Jersey, Steelman Town, and that's what the Green Burial Fund through the Rockland Community Foundation is established for, so we can have one here, at least as an option right here in Rockland County. Now, New York and New Jersey are among only 8 states that require the use of a funeral director. In all the other states, it's not required. But there are funeral directors in homes that are helping those that would like to choose a green burial. One of them is our guest today, Robert Prout from Prout Funeral Home, located in Verona, New Jersey. So I'd like to welcome in Mr. Robert Prout, co-owner and director. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I believe you prefer to go by Bob, is that correct?
That's fine. That's fine.
Well, thank you for being on the show today, Bob. Before we even open the phone lines, I'd like to hear a little bit from you, if you could tell us about your funeral practice. You are in Verona, which I did Google. It is located a little over a half hour from Rockland County, which isn't too far. Mm-hmm. And your funeral home provides a variety of funeral services, but you also do offer green burial options. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about your funeral home, how long you've been in business, and what inspired you to offer those services?
My grandfather had started the firm back in 1924, so we're going into our 91st year. We offer all options as far as funerals would be concerned, but my early years, background in scouting, which I'm still in, I have a degree in horticulture. Most of my background has been in conservation. I've served on the Shade Tree Commission in Verona for 35 years. I was on the Soil Conservation District for the state of New Jersey for many years. I just got off after 32 years. And all of my hobbies have revolved around conservation efforts. This was sort of a natural progression of some of those efforts. Back in 2004, I happened to see a small article about the New Jersey Clean Energy Program on page 78 of the local paper, which is in and of itself kind of unique in these days since the paper's no more than like 20 or 30 pages anymore. But back in the days when people read papers, it was a small article about the clean energy program and how they had subsidies for solar. I looked it up. I studied it for 6 or 8 months. And in July of '05, I put up a solar array on the roof of the funeral home, added to that array with the help of the clean energy program in 2009, and ended up with about 150 panels, which pretty much puts us about 90% independent of the grid. The oddity or the uniqueness of a very old line conservative industry, someone like ourselves going out for this modern technology, caught the ideas or the eye of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. We were also featured on CNN worldwide. And at that point, we started getting more and more calls from all over the Northeast about, do you do more sustainably oriented types of funerals? And that kind of got the ball rolling. We started doing a lot more of the natural burials. We've done some home funerals. We've offered more of the greener options to people. I worked with a couple of companies as far as the development of a formaldehyde-free embalming for those that do not want to use formaldehyde, which again is not even on the radar if you were having a natural burial. And then started speaking before primarily funeral director groups, but about a year ago I was down in Florida speaking before the American Association of Gerontology. So there is a growing interest in this type of movement, this option of burial. And when you stop to really think of it, this option is nothing more than what mankind has been doing with their dead for thousands of years. You go back to Little House on the Prairie. Most of the countries of the world today are opting for natural burials or greener funerals. The U.S. and some of the countries in Europe are one of the among the few that will tend towards having the body embalmed or a more elaborate type of funeral service. But as you started to say at the very beginning of the program, you don't really need anything more for a burial than the body. And you can strip away the flower cars or the limousines, but you need that core component, and that's the body. And this is a returning to nature, returning to the elements in as natural a manner as possible. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. And Ed Bixby from the Steelmantown Cemetery, I think, said it best. We were at a summit meeting of the leaders in the green burial movement out in Santa Fe about 2 years ago. And he said the issue is you've really got to experience, you've got to be there to witness a true natural burial to really get the full depth and gauge the emotional impact that you can have with a burial like this. It's not something that comes across in reading an article or discussion as easily as if you were there to witness it itself. It's a very guttural, it's a very emotional feel, because you're allowing many members of the family to opt in on more involvement within the burial process itself. They're no longer relegated to being witnesses in the front pew or spectators in the front pew. They can have the option of becoming more involved. They can have the option of washing and shrouding or washing and dressing their own dead. They have the option of bringing the dead out to the natural burial cemetery. So there are a lot more options for family involvement that the conventional funerals of today don't allow for. That being said, I think most any funeral home in the country is capable of handling these. It's just that the consumer has to relay to the funeral director what they're looking for, and if that firm's not willing to accommodate them, they have to find a firm that will. But there are a lot of firms that will offer these options at this point in time. It's a growing movement.
Since you are someone who has helped educate other funeral homes on this, I guess, more popular, growing in popularity option, how is it being accepted by the industry?
It's being supported by the industry. The National Funeral Directors Association has a separate committee at this point that looks into many of the greener options and is supportive of the greener options. I had spoken to the National Funeral Directors Association meeting in Boston a couple of years ago, and there were not that many people in the room. I just spoke at the National Convention in Nashville last October, and the room was a lot fuller. We had probably 6 or 8 folks, mainly younger funeral directors, stick around afterwards and have a roundtable discussion for close to an hour and a half after the 2-hour seminar was over. So the people that are embracing it full throttle and are very pro movement. There's absolutely no problems. As with any business or industry or ministry, there are going to be some members of the old guard that are very comfortable in the way they've been doing it for 30 or 40 years and might not be as willing to adapt to the newer options that are out there. But even some of those people are starting to see the value in a greener funeral service option.
This is a half-hour show, and we do have a lot to cover, but I would like to open the phone lines if anyone would like to call in. The call-in number is 362-0013, and you are listening to Dying to Bloom. And our guest today is co-owner and director of Prout Funeral Home in Verona, New Jersey, Robert Prout. So this is an opportunity to ask the funeral director if you do have any questions as we go along. Bob, I would like to ask you as well, you are certified by the Green Burial Council. Can you let us know what the Green Burial Council does and what that certification means?
Green Burial Council was started about 10 years ago or so by Joe Seehey out in New Mexico. And his idea was sort of to have a third-party vetting or type of criteria so that the consumer would be able to follow that and any of the providers that are certified by the Green Burial Council would at least have some of the minimum standards as set by the council to qualify for green burials. It's not quite the same as the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, but it's kind of along those lines that they're trying to establish guidelines as to prevent greenwashing from occurring and to make sure that any of their certified providers, if you as a consumer were to call them, you could be assured that they're going to offer all the options that you would like without you having to explain exactly what you're looking for and try to go through some of the paperwork. We were the first in New Jersey to be certified by the Green Burial Council and among the first in the nation to be certified by the Green Burial Council. And you were talking about the industry. The National Funeral Directors Association also has an accreditation that they have a green burial accreditation. We were the first in the nation to be receive that accreditation as well. That's more of an industry type of thing, whereas the Green Burial Council tends to be more of an independent third party setting up the requirements and criteria. And some of the criteria would be that you would offer home funerals, that you would offer embalming less type of means of preservation, that you would have and make available any of the sustainably grown and biodegradable types of caskets if a consumer wants to use that instead of a shroud.
I'm glad you mentioned home funerals because I do want to talk about that, but I also want to clarify some things for the listeners in case The Green Cemetery Conservation Area that I'm talking about sounds a little too far-fetched for you, and that's a little far out there. But you may be a little interested in green burial and may say, you know what, I don't need to spend the money in embalming, and I would like to go in a biodegradable shroud or casket. There are options locally at cemeteries such as Sleepy Hollow over in Westchester and Mary Rest in Mahwah, which are really what we consider regular cemeteries. I hate to use that word, but where you would go in and see the regular stones, you would see mausoleums, but they also have made a green section where they leave the land undisturbed, where people can be buried there. So that may be more for someone listening. I, of course, do like the conservation burial, and I do hope that we have one here in the Rockland County area in the future. But since you did mention home funerals, you know, me being the advocate that I am for this, I would love to have a home funeral like we did traditionally, where the body was waked in the home. And I would love a green burial. For now, let's say Green Springs is one of my famous, or favorite, I should say, cemeteries. So, Mr. Proud, if you can just let me know, how could you provide me with those services? And can you, being that I'm in New York and you're in New Jersey?
Well, the licensures in both states have to be adhered to, obviously. For a home funeral really to take place, we would need to engage the services of a New York State licensed funeral director, and there are plenty within New York State that would be able to accommodate you on that also. I've had funerals from all over the Northeast for natural burials. I've gone to other states and taken care of transferring the remains here and met the family at Green Springs that you've mentioned, or at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. And at that point, there's not as dire a need to have a New York State funeral director involved, as long as we're not having the services, stopping over and having the services, which in this case would be at your home.
So if someone died naturally in Rockland County and wanted to be buried at Green Springs, could you provide the services for that?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We have, and what we do is we take one of my colleagues that I've gone to school with, who's licensed in New York, will take care of the paperwork, the legal paperwork in New York, and then we'll just meet the family right at the cemetery, whether it be Tarrytown or Newfield, New York.
And we do have a caller on the line. Good morning. You're on Dying to Bloom.
Hi, Carrie, and your guest. It's Judy. I'm so glad I finally got to listen to your show. It's wonderful, because this is really a topic that's near and dear to my heart as well. My mother died many years ago, and afterwards I read Jessica Mitford's book, The American Way of Death, which is now in an updated form, and it's all about the abuses in the funeral home and how the funeral directors, and we experienced that, they take advantage of the grief of the relatives. And Jessica Mitford's funeral cost $533. She was cremated without a ceremony, and her ashes were scattered at sea. And so I've always been interested in, I don't want to leave my kids with a big funeral bill. It's mind-boggling.
Well, I believe if you look further into it, Jessica Mitford's funeral, the cremation itself was less, but I believe she had a reception and a memorial service that more than likely exceeded the funerals of that day.
Wow.
So she did have a gathering, as I recall, and I would have to look through my files, but she did have a gathering because there was a memorial service following her death. But a lot of times with the funeral industry, all the funeral directors that I know of or affiliate with are very good, upstanding people. As with any business, as with any industry, as with the clergy, you're going to have some bad apples. There is no questioning about that. And it's up to the consumer to be alert enough to see and ask the questions and to find the the firm that they would be comfortable with. And I think that's the whole key, too. It's shows like this that bring to the forefront the different options that are available. And
yeah, but I also, a friend of mine, when her mother died and her father was like, oh, she has to have the very best. They sometimes, back in the day, they started off offering you the Cadillac, and then, or the Rolls Royce, and then moving down the line. So I don't know if that's still a practice now.
It has not been, and it is not at our firm. So I'm not sure where you've been going, but that is not the process.
No, this was back in the day when I was growing up in Brooklyn, so it was a long time ago.
Well, thank you for calling, Judy. And that's one of the reasons I like to do this show, is to help bring up discussion and education on the choices that are available. One of my guests have been Josh Slocum, Executive Director of the Funeral Consumers Alliance. And that's an important organization to visit their website, funerals.org, and educate yourself on the choices you have instead of leaving it to last minute or when we're in our most vulnerable time when someone passes. Mr. Proud, of course, I commend your funeral home for providing a variety of choices for, of course, your solar energy and going green as far as burials go. You also do provide cremation services and embalming services as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, ma'am.
And because Judy brought up price, can you just, I wasn't really planning on doing this, but I think it is good for our listeners to hear. Can you just tell us a little bit of the requirements, starting with the requirements and then going through some of the options that people have? I mean, because New York and New Jersey are those states that do require the use of a funeral director, bare minimum, what are the requirements that we need to incur the cost for?
Well, a lot of the concept of a natural burial or a greener funeral isn't necessarily pegged to cost. It's more of a concept. It's more of a lifestyle. What I have found is that people who have gone through their life, like myself, with an eye towards conservation. I drive a Prius. I've got the solar panels. People that have been raised with the idea of recycling, they're going to organic food stores, probably paying more for an organically grown banana than if they were to go to a regular store. This is an extension of that lifestyle, that they do not wish to tread hard upon the earth in their death choices when they've been living treading lightly upon the environment. So this whole movement is more of a concept, in my mind, is more of a conceptual thing than cost. That being said, many of the costs affiliated with a natural burial are going to be a lot less because you're utilizing many less services of the funeral firm. The traditional funerals can, without cemetery costs, can run anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 and up, depending upon the choices that you make as far as times of visiting, whether or not you want limousines, whether or not you were to have a casket, or if your cemetery requires a vault. So a lot of the options, you've got many options in a more conventional funeral. With cremation in and of itself is simply the means of disposition. You still have the option of having time of visiting, a service, either a church service or a humanistic service. And at the end of the visiting or at the end of the service, we would go to the crematory as opposed to the cemetery. And in that case, some of the costs can be similar, although a little bit less, but they're similar to a conventional funeral, because you're utilizing many of the same services of the funeral home. You also have the option of an immediate burial, where you would meet the family directly. We would meet the family directly at the cemetery for the burial. You would have the option of an immediate cremation, where there is no service prior to the cremation. There might be a memorial service afterwards, as I said, something like what Jessica Mitford had. And then you have your natural burials and your greener funerals. Probably your least costly, if you're getting into strictly dollars and cents, would be to have an immediate cremation and no services at all. That can range, depending upon the funeral home, from, say, $1,000 or less up to $3,000 or $4,000. And again, it's not fair to say that one funeral home might be gouging, because you've got to look at what the circumstances of that firm would be. Obviously, someone, a funeral director who's doing business in Brooklyn, like that woman had said, the real estate taxes, the overhead, the insurance, the pay scale, everything is a lot greater than someone who would be, say, up by Ithaca, New York, where the costs are tremendously less. Direct cremation is going to be your lower cost option. An immediate burial or a natural burial would probably come in next. And in our instance here at in Verona, we have an option to go to Mary Rest Cemetery or to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. That would be approximately $4,100, and that would take care of the transfer of the deceased. That would, back here to the funeral home, the washing and shrouding of the deceased. That would include the shroud, the hearse up to the cemetery, as well as any permitting or record keeping that were required by law to maintain as a funeral home.
If someone was going to choose that option, could they have a service? And do you? I guess people can have different choices. You can have a brief graveside service.
Certainly.
Otherwise, if you wanted to have a more type of a gathering at the funeral home, do you do that? And how is the body preserved, since there is no embalming?
You can use either refrigeration or dry ice, and you can very successfully hold that body for a period of time. You have to keep in mind, most people that opt for a natural burial are not looking for any of the frills that would be involved. What is important to many people with the natural burial idea is more of a gathering of the family and or the community to show support for the immediate family at the time of death. They've opted for a natural burial because, as you said, they believe in the land conservation aspect. It's an extension of their lifestyle. It sometimes it's a matter of price, but mostly it's more of the concept, as you were saying, that you believe very strongly in the land conservation concept of it, and to you would probably pay more, even though you don't have to achieve that goal of land conservation, because it's something that's important to you. And in those regards, many of the natural burial people that I've dealt with, it's more of an idea of having the support shown and the gathering and being able to be involved in the care of their dead than it is a matter of putting on a day or so of visiting and having a flower car or a limousine or a church service and a burial and or an entombment in a mausoleum.
We just have a few minutes left. I do want to give the phone number one last time if you want to try and squeeze in a question. The number is 845-362-0013. We do have Mr. Robert Prout from Prout Funeral Home in Verona, New Jersey on the line. He is co-owner and director, and we are discussing the green burial services that are provided at Prout Funeral Home. I would like to mention your website, which is proutfuneralhome.com. If you would like to visit, check out their services, find out more about their funeral home. And again, the solar energy that you put in there, is that actually panels on the roof of the funeral home?
I have originally through the Clean Energy Program of the state of New Jersey, I had put 114 panels on the roof. And then in 2009, I added another 36 panels on a fence in the rear of the parking lot for a total of 150 panels. At the time, I had gone with BP Solar because I figured, well, they're a big company and they were digging in for the long haul, so I thought they have since gotten out of the solar production, and they had a recall on some of their panels. So this past year, I took down approximately 78 panels. They bought me out of the warranty. They paid me to take the panels down. And for what they paid me, I took off, I think it was 78 panels, and put up a new set of 46 panels. And even with roughly 30 panels less on my roof, I'm still putting out about 3,000 more watts because the efficiencies of the panels and the technology has improved so greatly that I'm still making out pretty well on it overall.
So hear that, all environmentalists. If besides recycling, you can, there's another way to recycle, put it that way, and consider that for your burial choice. And it sounds like Prout Funeral Home is definitely a green way to go out. Again, it's proutfuneralhome.com. And I would love to have you back on another show, Mr. Prout.
Sure, I'd be glad to be there.
I did share with you our new coverage map, so in the near future we will be covering your area and beyond on our WRCR 1700. And one of these shows, I would also like to address cremation. I haven't covered that topic yet. Perhaps you can be the one to help provide some information as far as that choice goes. We did have someone in to talk about donating your body to science through the local university hospitals that provide that service. And I'm sorry to say to you, that seems to be the cheapest way to go, since they do return the cremated remains to the family members. And I'm also curious if you are familiar with the alkaline hydrolysis, and if that's something you would be pursuing if it becomes a legal option in New Jersey.
I'm not a keen fan of alkaline hydrolysis. I believe that the traditional cremation is probably the way to go if that is the option that you're looking for.
Oh, in the few minutes that we have left, why do you say that?
I just think that there are too many options there that I'm not a keen member of. I don't like the idea of chemical dissolving of human remains. It's just a guttural feel. I know it produces a very clean set of cremated ash, but or reduced ash, but I'm not just a guttural feel. I'm not keen on the idea.
Well, that could be a good topic for future discussion. Again, I would like to cover cremation, and I would like to cover alkaline hydrolysis along with the man who invented that process. It was my understanding that it is natural chemicals used, and but I do not know how much water and energy it uses in comparison to cremation, and how much more environmentally friendly it really is. But let's end the show talking about you. I really appreciate you being on today. I'm very excited to learn more about your funeral home, and thank you for the green services you provide. And we hope to have you on again.
Well, I thank you very much for providing a venue to get the word out of what these options are. You're doing a tremendous service as far as the consumer is concerned, and just letting people know what's out there and what's available.
Robert Prout, thank you for joining us.
Very good. Thank you.
And again, you can find out more about the Prout Funeral Home by visiting proutfuneralhome.com. It's Prout, funeralhome.com. And I'm going to end this show with a quote that I found right on their website, which is a quote from Gandhi. Where there is love, there is life. I'm Carrie Potter. Thanks for tuning in to Dying to Bloom.